Okay, now we're going to go into the parent demographic. We've made it to section 4 out of 7 of the application. We're entering parent information. We will need to enter their social security number. Our student has entered the social security number, the last name for the parents, the first name for the parent, date of birth, and email address. Again, make sure you're entering email addresses that are accurate and that you are frequently checking. Our student enters that information and hits continue. That's for parent 1. Now the application has captured that information. They are asking you to enter information for the second parent or other parent. The application will identify each of them as parent 1 and parent 2. So make sure that you keep track of who you're considering parent 1 and parent 2. We've entered our information. We'll hit continue. All right, now just like the student section, the application wants to know what your parents' state of legal residence is. In our case, our student has said that the state of legal residence is California. So it's going to ask them, okay, were your parents physically present in the state of California for the last since January 1st, 2017? And then you would answer accordingly. If they were, then you'd say yes. If they were not, you'd say no. Our student is going to say yes, allowing them to continue. Now, if our student says no before they hit continue, the question will populate another question. When did your parents become legal residents? And then they would enter the month and year. Remember again, legal residence is not referring to legal permanent resident status. It's simply referring to physical presence in the state of California, even physically being here, filing California taxes, or having some type of residence and physical presence in the state. Okay, we've answered those questions accordingly. We're going to hit continue. Then it's going to bring us over to the dependent section. Very important that you read through these categories so that you understand who is a dependent. And you see that blue-gray section at the top that says do not include yourself, the student. This is the one section where the application doesn't want to know about you, the student. It wants to know about your parents' other dependents. So this first section says, how many other dependent children do your parents have? These are dependents that rely on your parents for more than half of their support between July 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2023. You can answer no to every dependency. They can answer no to every dependency status question on the FAFSA. This is typically referring to your siblings. So if you have siblings and your parents provide more than 50% of their support to, then you would want to include them. Siblings are the only ones that may not physically be living in the household. So sometimes we have older siblings that are away for college, but they're still our parents dependent. So just because they're away from college doesn't mean we don't include them, okay? Be very careful about this as these answers do impact your financial aid eligibility. You want to answer accordingly. So in this case, the student is saying, I have one other sibling and they are my parents dependent. They've answered 1. Now it brings us to the next category. How many other dependents do your parents have? So other than your siblings, do your parents have dependents that live with them? The other dependents must reside in the same household. They must be receiving more than half of their financial support from your parent. And they will continue to receive that support and live with your parent between July 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2023. So if you have, for example, a grandparent or aunt, uncle, or any other individual that meets those 3 categories, those 3 requirements right there, then you would enter them. So sometimes we have households that have more than one or more than one family in the household. We don't include everyone. We only include those that your parents or that rely on your parents for their financial support. In our case, our students have one other individual that the parents provide more than their 50% of their support to and live with them. We've entered our answers. We'll hit continue. Now the application is going to give you a summary of your household size. The application automatically calculated the student's household size as 5. It included you, the student. It included the parents, That's two, because we entered parent information for two people. And then it included our sibling, our other dependent, or our parents' other dependent children, and then their other dependent. So 5. Those are the 5 individuals that were included in the household size. Now it wants to know, out of those 3 dependents, you, the student, the individual in college, and the other dependent that your parents have, out of those 3, because it doesn't want to know about your parents and whether they're in college, just their dependents. Out of those 3, how many will be in college between July 1st, 2022 and June 30th, 2023? Our student has indicated 2 people. This is a part where you would include yourself, you, and then the other individual. In this case, it would be 2 people. Okay, we would hit continue. Now, thank you so much for listening to that first section on the demographics section and entering all of that parent information. I'm going to go ahead and pass the virtual microphone to my colleague, Rudy Sanchez, that will walk us through the parent and student financial sections. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Paola, for sharing all of your expertise and knowledge. Good to join you all. At this point, we are entering the parent and student financial section. We've made amazing progress throughout the FAFSA application. We are entering kind of the midway point of the application. So very good, we're getting there. And as we can see, the financial section is going to come along with it a lot of questions about income, about tax information. So things can start to get maybe a little dense, a little overwhelming at times, but we will work through each question slowly. As we've been learning, some of these questions, the way we're answering them will just depend on our background, right? On our situation, on our goals. And we're trying to acknowledge and accommodate for each different option. And especially when we enter these questions about income, about tax questions, we're going to see that a lot of things depend on whether we're filing taxes or we're working. And so we do want to present all of these options, but of course, make sure that you all continue to take advantage of the Q&A feature. I'm so glad to see that throughout our presentation, that's been very active. You all have been asking great questions. Those have been getting answered. So I've been happy to see those notifications going up and down throughout our presentation, but continue to submit those questions through that Q&A feature, especially as we're entering the financial section. Now, something to keep in mind in this financial section is that we are going to see questions which are posed to the student and also questions which are posed to the parent, at least for those of you who are dependent students and who are able to provide parent information. We are going to see those parent questions, okay? In our example, in the screens we've been showing you, we have a student who is considered by the FAFSA a dependent student, which, as we learned, means that parent information is needed. We will first start looking at those parent questions. We are going to see that there are income and tax questions that are directed at the parent. And then we're going to see that then there are questions directed at the student. So as Paola shared with us, keep in mind, pay close attention when you are working through your FAFSA application and answering those questions. Pay attention to see if the question is asking about parent information or about student information. Both sets of questions are actually identical. So something just kind of as a general, as some general guidance, consider that the way that you're answering these questions, whether it's you as a student or your parent, because we're going to see that the student and parent are asked the same exact questions. But if you as the student or your parent filed taxes in 2020, just keep in mind that you're going to have some options in terms of how you respond. So if you're not going to file, whether you as a student didn't file, you're not required to file taxes in 2020, or the parent, you can say that on the application. You can say that you're not going to file. Now, some of you might have a tax extension, or some of you might still be getting to filing taxes in 2020. So if that's true for you as the student or the parent, you do have the option to state that, okay? We don't want you to think that because you haven't filed taxes yet, somehow you can't complete the application, somehow you can't qualify for financial aid. If that is your situation, if you still need to get around to filing your taxes from 2020, you can say, will file. And for those of you who have already completed your taxes from 2020, if you've filed those taxes, whether you as the student or the parent, you can also state such, saying already completed. For those of you not filing taxes who weren't required to file taxes in 2020, keep in mind that you're still going to see a question, and we'll look at that together here shortly, but you will see a question which asks you to report any 2020 income that you earned from working. If you as the student or if your parent did work in 2020, did earn wages or income from working, you will need to report that. And for those of you, whether the student or the parent, who will file taxes or have already filed taxes in 2020, you do want to then look at those 2020 tax forms. Paola walked us through all of those required documents that we want to have available. So as you remember, you want to have those 2020 financial records, income tax returns, W-2s, or other records of income earned from working. Some of you all might have your own businesses, so you might have other records or ways to capture your income, and we'll also explore that a little bit when we start to look at these questions. So let's get back to the application. As was mentioned, our student is a dependent student, which means that parent information is required. And so for those of you who, through working on your FAFSA application, who are determined dependent and who are able to provide your parents' information, you will see this question. We're now in the parent financial section. You'll notice that at the top, we're in section 5, parent financials. And so the question reads, for 2020, have your parents completed their IRS income tax return or another tax return? And once again, you're going to have some options. You can say not going to file, will file, or already completed. For those of you whose parents did not file taxes and they're not required, they will not file taxes in 2020. As mentioned, they still will need to report any income that they earned from working. And you'll notice that in this example, we see those questions asking for both parent 1 and parent 2, how much was made? How much did they earn from working? Now, in order to answer this question, if your parents did work, you do want to check W-2 forms. We'll provide an example of that W-2 form. However, for those of you whose parent or both parents didn't work in 2020, that's fine. You can actually just enter 0, okay? If your parent or both parents did not work, enter 0, and you're still able to continue and move forward with the application. Here's an example of that W-2 form. For your parent or both parents, if they did work in 2020, make sure you're looking at that W-2 form. Make sure that you're looking at box 1. You want to take a look at the income, the wages that's reported in box 1. So that's once again an example. Make sure you're looking at 2020 when referring to that form, and you're going to enter the amount in box 1. For some of you, you might have multiple W-2s, right? Maybe you have several jobs, or maybe both of your parents were working and they each were working at a different place, right, for a different employer. So of course, just make sure that you're looking at all those W-2s. If one of your parents has multiple W-2s, just add those numbers together, numbers reported in box 1. I'll add those wages together to report that income. For those of you whose parent or both parents, if they did file taxes or will file taxes, you're going to see that there's some additional questions that come up. If you state that parents will file or have already completed 2020 taxes, you'll see there's some additional questions. A question asking about what type of income tax return was used, and then a question asking about their tax filing status. This is a great point to now look at the tax return information. So here on our screen, we're looking at an example of a 2020 IRS tax return. So of course, make sure you're looking at 2020, pay close attention to that. You'll see that for the IRS form, there's that large bolded 2020 right there at the top. And you want to look at all pages of the tax return. And this is where things can start to look very different, just depending on our individual unique tax situation. We might have more pages than others. It just depends on what we need to report. So just make sure that you have all pages. You're looking at all pages of the 1040. And for some of us, and we're gonna hear this terminology in a little bit, but some of us have to file our taxes, our 1040, using some additional forms. additional forms called schedules. So there could be IRS Schedule 1 or a Schedule 2, etc. So make sure that you have all of those pages, all of those schedules. You might need to be referring to those in order to answer the tax questions. In order to answer that question about tax filing status, here's an example of where you want to look. You'll notice at the top in bolded letters, you see filing status, and then there are a few options. So pay close attention to which boxes selected for your parent or both parents. They have there are a few filing status options. You can file using a single status, married filing jointly, married filing separately, head of household, and qualifying widower. So pay close attention to that. You're going to answer that question based on the filing status you see on that tax return. One thing we would like to encourage all of you to take advantage of, if possible, is a feature that's built into the FAFSA application. This feature is called the IRS Data Retrieval Tool, or DRT. This is a great resource, a great benefit. For those who are able to use this, this will allow tax information to get transferred, to get imported directly from the IRS. So all that tax data comes in automatically through the magic of data and computer systems, right? So if possible, try to take advantage of that. Depending on your parents' marital status, on their tax filing status, the FAFSA is going to confirm if they're able to use the data retrieval tool. If your parent is able to use this, then you will see that image, that icon saying that IRS data retrieval tool is available, is recommended. So try to take advantage of that. Okay, if you're able to, you want to select that proceed to the IRS button. What that will do is that will take you to the IRS website. Definitely looks like a government website, but you'll be able to then try and get that tax information transferred. You'll notice in using that tool, you're going to see that the parent's information is provided, and then you need to enter the address that's on the tax return. So we do hope that you can use that. Not everyone qualifies to use the data retrieval tool. If you don't see this, don't worry about it. You're able to still answer your answer the tax questions manually, right? But hopefully you can use this tool. If so, try to use it. You'll enter essentially the address as it appears on the tax return, and then choose to transfer that information. If you can use this, it's a great way to ensure the accuracy of the information on there, and it can help speed things up, right? Because those tax questions are all answered once things transfer over. But if you can't use it, as mentioned, that's okay. You can still answer each question manually, or if you don't want to use it, perhaps your parents don't want to use it, or if you already have your tax forms, you have the documents there, let's go ahead and just answer it. So you can always select skip the IRS DRT and complete manually. All right. Now, the tax question we see right now is asking about parents' adjusted gross income in 2020. For those of you whose parent or both parents filed taxes in 2020, you'll see this question about adjusted gross income. Now, notice on the FAFSA, as Paula shared with us, there's a lot of built-in guidance and help. There are instructions that indicate where on the tax form we need to look at. You'll see that instruction saying that the adjusted gross income is found on the IRS Form 1040, line 11. So it's telling us, hey, look at line 11, you'll see that adjusted gross income amount. And here's an example of where you want to look at. So here's a screenshot of that 1040. You'll see that number 11, that line 11. There's even adjusted gross income that's bolded there. And you'll want to enter the amount right there. So whatever amount you see right there for your parents' tax return, you want to enter. Some of you might have parents that have that filed separately, okay? Remember, depending on our situation, on each person's background, things could be a little different. So it could happen where parents have two separate tax returns. So if that's the case for you, if you're providing information about your parents, and if you need to report information for two parents and both your parents filed separately, then keep in mind that you're going to have to look at the two different tax returns, look at the adjusted gross income as reported on line 11, and just add them together for both of your parents. So you'll want to keep that in mind. Now, if you happen to see this as a negative number, you can enter that adjusted gross income as a negative number. Once again, enter the number as it appears on the tax return. Okay, once you've provided that information, The next question is going to ask about the income that your parent made from working. For those of you who have to report information for two parents, this question wants to know how much each parent made from working, okay? Now, you might need to look at some different forms. So we're gonna spend some time looking at these different forms and just paying close attention to this. If both of your parents were working in 2020, then you need to pay close attention to how much income each of your parents was making. And once again, you might need to look at some different forms, and we're going to walk through that together. If you know that one of your parents didn't work in 2020, then you're going to enter 0. And as Paula shared with us, we hopefully remember who's parent 1, who's parent 2. If you have two parents on there, then the first parent's information you entered is parent 1, and the other parent is going to be parent 2, okay? But if one or maybe even both didn't work in 2020, just go ahead and enter 0 for that parent or both parents if it were the case. You'll see with this question, we also have those instructions, right? Indicating that the amount of income is going to be found on the following areas. So we're going to want to look at IRS form 1040 line 1. If we're looking at that 1040, we can look at line 1. You'll see wages, salaries indicated right there. So to answer this question, we'll want to look at line 1. We might also need to look at another form, and you'll see on the instructions, IRS Schedule 1. So we'll also want to look at Schedule 1, lines 3 and 6. Now, this is going to apply if your parent or both parents have business income or farm income to report. Okay, if they have business income or farm income to report in 2020, then you're going to want to look at Schedule 1, lines 3 and 6, and we'll provide an example. And then lastly, if your parent filed using Schedule K1, then you might have to look at that too. So you might have to refer to what's called a Schedule K1, and we'll see an example here shortly. Of course, you can also look at those W-2s. So just as a reminder, in order to answer this question about income earned from working, you can look at the W-2. And this might be a good option for you. If both of your parents were working and if both of your parents filed taxes together, then the amount that you see on line 1, on the 1040 line 1, that might be combined, okay? If both of your parents were employees, they were working somewhere, they have an employer, then their income, their wages is actually combined on 1040 line 1, and then you won't know which parent, how much income each parent made from working. So you could just refer to the W-2s as well. So you'll want to look at the W-2s for each parent. Once again, look at the 2020 W-2 and pay attention to the amounts reported on box 1. Here's an example of the 1040 line 1. So remember, in order to answer this question about income earned from working for your parent or both parents, you could also look here. But once again, if both of your parents worked in 2020, then they might have their income combined on this line. So you'd want to then look at W-2s. Some of you have parents who have a business and have business income they're reporting, or have farm income to report. You'll want to look at Schedule 1. As a reminder, not everyone needs to use Schedule 1 in order to file their taxes. As you're flipping through those pages of the tax return, if you're not seeing this, then you don't necessarily have to panic, okay? It's likely that your parents didn't have to use Schedule 1. People only need to use Schedule 1 if they have certain types of income or certain deductions that they need to report. So once again, if your parents didn't use Schedule 1, then there's nothing to report from here. You don't need to worry about somehow finding this. But if your parents did use Schedule 1, just pay close attention to line 3 and 6, business and farm income. You'll need to report those amounts. And then once again, there's another schedule. If a parent is needing to use Schedule 1 because of an S corporation or partnership, etc., if they need to use Schedule 1, then pay close attention to see if they have anything reported in this box 14, anything reported that has a code A. All right, so if your parent used a Schedule K1, if you see in 14 there's that A letter and income, an amount reported as income, then you will need to report that. So once again, there could be a few forms where you need to refer to in order to gather information about income, but essentially in this section of the FAFSA, for those parents who file taxes, the FAFSA just wants to know how much income did your parents earn. And as we learned, that income could be reported in these different areas, the 1040 line 1 For those whose parents have business or farm income, the Schedule 1, or if Schedule K1 was used, as we see on the screen, there could be income reported.